our flip video lesson. This lesson has two parts. So the first part is Hammurabi's Code, and the second part is Nebuchadnezzar Builds. So for our first part, we have reading pages 85 to 87, your student guide pages 77 to 82, your assignment is your OMS lesson, and then the topic, King Hammurabi and his Code of Laws. And then our objectives: analyze primary source material to recognize the significance of written law, explain the historical significance of Hammurabi's principle that the strong shall not oppress the weak, and identify Hammurabi and his most significant accomplishments. Introduction: Hammurabi's Code. Why do we have laws? Is it to protect us from criminals? To make it clear to everyone what is allowed and what is not? To help the government control the citizens? Hammurabi wasn't the first ruler to have laws written down, but his ideas about the purpose and the organization of law have had a lasting impact on the world. Who was King Hammurabi? King Hammurabi was born around 1810 BC in the Mesopotamian city-state of Babylon. His father, Sin-Mulabit, was king of Babylon. Although not a lot is known about Hammurabi's youth, he was raised as the crown prince of Babylon. He likely attended a school called the Tablet House. He was taught about the Babylonian gods and history of the great leaders of Mesopotamia. He also learned how to fight and lead in an army. Sorry to move that over there. As he grew older, he learned how to rule by watching his father and listening to his advisors. Becoming king. When Hammurabi turned 18 years old, his father became very sick. Soon his father died, and young Hammurabi was crowned king of the city-state of Babylon. At this time, Babylon was a fairly small kingdom. There were many other larger kingdoms surrounding Babylon, including Assyria, Mari, Larsa, and Eshnunna. It was now Hammurabi's job to keep the city safe and help it to prosper. This may sound like a daunting task for an 18-year-old, but Hammurabi was not scared. He was confident he could lead. He had a plan. Improving Babylon. For the first several years of Hammurabi's reign, he concentrated on improving the city of Babylon. Hammurabi knew he needed peace to make these improvements, so he established treaties with the most powerful nations in Mesopotamia. Once he felt the city was safe, he went to work. Hammurabi worked to improve the defenses and infrastructure of the city. He strengthened the city walls, improved the city's irrigation system, and built new temples to the gods. The city became prosperous and grew in power. And this information is taken from the Duxter's website. The credits are down here on the bottom, but if you're ever looking for additional information for history, the Duxter's website has things outlaid very, very nicely. After several years of building, Hammurabi's peace came to an end. The powerful kingdom of Elam invaded Mesopotamia and conquered the kingdom of Eshnunna. The city of Babylon was next in their path. Hammurabi called on his ally of Larsa to help, and then he gathered his army to fight the Elamites. Hammurabi and his army faced the Elamites. He expected a battle from Larsa to arrive, but it never did. However, Hammurabi had done a good job in preparing Babylon for battle. He crushed the Elamites, founding an empire. After defeating the Elamites, Hammurabi turned his attention to former ally Larsa. He was not happy that they had betrayed him. He invaded Larsa and took control of their cities. He then turned his army to the north and began conquering more cities and nations. Soon, Hammurabi controlled all of Mesopotamia. He had established the first Babylonian empire and was king of the 4 quarters of the world. Code of Hammurabi. Once Hammurabi had conquered Mesopotamia, he didn't consider his work done. He wanted to improve the way of life for all people in his kingdom. He embarked on many reforms and construction projects. He built new canals, aqueducts, and temples throughout the land. Today, Hammurabi is most famous for enacting a new set of laws called the Code of Hammurabi. These laws were carved into stone columns called stelae that everyone could read. They were 282 laws. Death. Hammurabi died in 1750 BC after 43 years of rule. His final years were ones of peace and prosperity for the people of Mesopotamia. Okay, how do we know about the Code of Hammurabi? The Code of Hammurabi was written down on clay tablets and etched into stone. It is one of the oldest recording codes of law in the world. One of the best surviving examples of the code is written down on the diorite stele or stelae. Diorite stele. The diorite stele is a large stone shaped like a giant finger. It is about 7 feet tall and 2 feet wide. 7 feet tall, that's really tall. It contains about 4,000 lines of text describing 282 different laws. At the top or fingertip of the stele is a carved picture of King Hammurabi being given the laws from the Babylonian god Shamash. The Code of Law. The actual Code of Law was divided up into groupings. Many of the laws that had to do with one subject were grouped together. They would have helped people to find and read just the laws that pertain to them. So you can go ahead and read this on your own. You can pause this video. But over on the right-hand side, examples of the law. The laws described exactly what a worker should earn, and some laws were very harsh and the penalties were severe. So think about this as you're reading through your lesson and kind of listening to this. If a son should strike his father, his hand shall be cut off. If a man put out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. If any man should strike a man of higher rank, he shall receive 60 blows with an ox whip. If a builder builds a house for someone and that house collapses, killing them, the builder shall be put to death. So those laws seem very harsh, and they are, but there were no set of laws prior to this that were established. And so this was kind of the first set of laws that actually put some consequences into place, although some of those consequences are as I said, pretty large and pretty harsh. Hammurabi today. Hammurabi is still famous today because he established order by giving his people a code of laws that applied to everybody. His laws were not perfect, nor were they fair, but this was the first real attempt to protect the weak from the strong. His legal code, which was based on an older set of Sumerian and Akkadian laws, was an enormous step forward in civilization's concept of justice. And again, you can pause this video if you need to. You can take a look over on the right-hand side and read those for yourself. For sake of time, we're going to keep moving on. So turn to page 79 in your student guide. So this is an on-your-own activity. This is an activity where you're going to kind of match up laws that Hammurabi handed out with how they applied. So you can go ahead and pause the video. You can complete this activity, and when you come back and start the video again, we'll go ahead and talk about the answers that are correct or where they should be. Okay, and just like that, you're back. So Hammurabi's code answer key. So what aspects of life do these sections regulate or illustrate? And so you can see there, codes 2 and 3 protect the rights of the accused. Code 5 shows a judicial system was in place. Code 30 regulates land ownership. Code 195 shows how children should treat their parents. Codes 200 to 203 illustrates class differences in terms of punishment. Code 215 regulates physicians. And codes 229 to 230 regulates construction. Again, these laws, these codes are not perfect, but they were put in place and did establish at least a set of laws that people could follow. How does the code differ for citizens of different classes? This is page 81. The code is harsher for lower classes and slaves. Question number 2, how will the code affect the empire? Are there benefits? The written rules make the rules and punishments clear. People in all parts of the large empire are treated the same way. All the people in the empire are protected. Questions number 3 and 4. Question number 3, are the punishments too strict? Yes, in many ways, and no in others, considering the time period. What are your thoughts? So think about that. As we talk about history, remember, we talk about how you have to be able to understand history in relation to the time period in which it was happening. So yes, these laws seem horrible and awful and like just kind of barbaric and crazy to us, but in the time period, that was the standard. So not as barbaric and crazy if you consider them during the time period that they were made. Question number 4, does the code regulate the daily life of individual citizens? Yes, it does. This is page 82. The empire has grown a great deal in a short time. Has this made the code more important? Why or why not? A larger empire requires more regulation to maintain order and fairness. And then question number 6, Hammurabi described the purpose of the code as to cause justice to prevail, to destroy the wicked, that the strong may not oppress the weak. Give 2 examples from the code that suggest that it accomplished its purpose or that it suggests it did not. So the strong not oppress the weak, 3, 5, and 30. Justice prevails, 3, 5, and 230. and then destroy the wicked at 95. And you can, again, flip back and look through those. You can pause this video. I know I went through those questions quickly, but that's why it's in video format, so you can pause. All right, as always, make sure you're completing your reading, pages 85 to 87. A few vocabulary words. Hammurabi's Code is a Babylonian legal code with a collection of 282 rules. Established standards for criminal and civil matters. Adapted means to make suitable to requirements or conditions, adjust or modify fittingly. Expanded is increase in area, bulk, or volume, and large. And then primary sources, a first-hand or contemporary account of an event or topic, most direct evidence of a time or event. And then here we come to our quote: "The life of law has not been logic, it has been experience." And that was said by Oliver Wendell Holmes. And we are now going to move on to part 2 of this flip video. And I know this is a long one, so I appreciate you sticking with me. Part 2 is Nebuchadnezzar builds. And again, this is the second part of 3.08. So this covers reading pages 88 to 94. Student guide pages 83 to 85. Oops, I did not change that. That should not say assessment. That should say OMS lesson. And then about the topic, Nebuchadnezzar, the Hanging Gardens, and Babylonians. And then our objectives: identify Nebuchadnezzar and his major accomplishments. Describe how the Babylonians overcame great architectural and engineering challenges to build the Hanging Gardens. Identify the Hanging Gardens as one of the 7 wonders of the world, of the ancient world. Recognize the importance of the Euphrates River to the success and splendor of Babylon. And summarize the legend that explains why Nebuchadnezzar built the Hanging Gardens. And as always, it's important that you're completing your reading to tie all of that together. Introduction: Nebuchadnezzar builds. Imagine traveling by boat along the Euphrates River to the city of Babylon. You pass through a dusty plain, a desert. The sun is beating down on you, and the heat is intense. Now you see the city in the distance. You begin to distinguish the roofs of buildings and a high wall surrounding them. Then you see something else. Plants seem to float above the city. In the middle of this flat, arid land is a green mountain. Arid means dry. A mountain that was not there when you visited as a child. How could that be? Who built it? How? And why? Who was Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon? And again, this is a little descriptor by Dexter's. Early life. Nebuchadnezzar was born around 634 BC in the city of Babylon. His father was Nabopolassar, the king of Babylon. Growing up, Nebuchadnezzar was raised as the crown prince of the nation. He learned about the Babylonian gods, the laws of Babylon, and how to fight and lead an army. When Nebuchadnezzar was born, Babylon was ruled by the Assyrian Empire. However, while still a boy, his father led a revolt against the Assyrians. He allied with Medes and defeated the Assyrians, sacking the city of Nineveh in 612 BC, becoming king. As Nebuchadnezzar grew older, he took on more responsibility. He became the general of his father's army. In 605 BC, he took a great army and marched against the armies of Egypt and Assyria. He fought them at the Battle of Carchemish, which he crushed them, removing the last resistance to the Babylonian Empire in the Middle East. Nebuchadnezzar's father died while he was away at battle. He quickly returned to Babylon and claimed his crown. He was now king of the Babylonian Empire. Restoring Babylon. With his enemies defeated, Nebuchadnezzar went about restoring the city of Babylon. He rebuilt and improved many of the temples of the gods. He also built an enormous palace that included the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar also improved the defense of the city of Babylon with an enormous double wall that stretched for 10 miles around the city. Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar made Babylon the capital of his great empire. Sorry about that. To protect the splendid city, he encircled it with three 11-mile-long walls. He diverted the Euphrates to a river to create a moat and laced the city with canals to provide transportation and irrigation. Inside the city walls, on the east bank of the Euphrates, stood the temple of Asagila, and the great ziggurat at Tamanki. Those are words that we don't normally pronounce every day in our regular language, also known as the Tower of Babel. The processional way lined the glazed brickwork decorated with animals, led northward from Asagila through the Ishtar Gate to the New Year, Akidu Temple. Northwest of the processional way stood Nebuchadnezzar's palace and legendary Hanging Gardens. Babylon, located east of the Euphrates River in what is now southern Iraq. Babylon was one of the most important cities of the ancient world. Merchants, some of them from as far away as India and China, traveled up the river to trade their goods in Babylon. This painting shows one artist's version of what the glorious city must have looked like to a traveler approaching Babylon. When Herodotus visited, he declared, "It surpasses in splendor any other city of the known world. Enormous fortified walls and removable bridges protect the city. A moat surrounded the city." Ishtar Gate. The Ishtar Gate was the northern entrance to Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. It was one of several gates of protection which allowed people to enter and leave the walled city and kept enemies out. Brilliantly colored glazed bricks decorated the gate and the processional walkway. Lions, remi, which is a type of wild boar or ox, and serpent-like creatures like dragons graced the gate. All three animals represent protective gods worshipped by the Babylonians. All of the gates in the city were dedicated to the gods. Inscribed on the walls in cuneiform are the words, "Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, am I." I pulled down these gates and laid their foundation at the water table with asphalt and brick, and had them made of bricks and blue stone, on which wonderful bulls and dragons were depicted. I covered their roofs by laying majestic cedars lengthwise over them. I fixed doors of cedar wood adorned with bronze at all the gate openings. I placed wild bulls and ferocious dragons in the gateways, and thus adorned them with luxurious splendor, so that mankind might gaze on them in wonder. Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the world. According to the legend, King Nebuchadnezzar built the Hanging Gardens to remind his homesick wife, King Amyntas, of her homeland. She came from the lush and mountainous land of Media. To maintain the terraced mountain of lush plants in sun-baked Mesopotamia, the architect devised a pump to irrigate the gardens. And this is a chain pump. The Babylonians used an indigenous device to water the gardens. They wrapped chain around the rims of 2 large wheels, then they hung buckets from the chain. As enslaved people turned the wheels, the buckets would dip into the pool and pick up water from the river. The chain would carry the buckets to the upper wheel, where the buckets tipped and spilled the water into an upper pool. Gates controlled the water in the pool at the top of the gardens. When the Babylonians wanted to irrigate the gardens, they would open the gates and the water would flow down into the channel like artificial streams. Terraces were built so shade trees, exotic shrubs, and colorful flowers could be planted high on the walls. Fountains, pools, and waterfalls cooled the gardens, which is incredible technology for that time. Tower of Babel. Looming over Babylon was the famous Tower of Babel. The multi-level ziggurat, which was a temple to the god Marduk, was so tall it seemed to be reaching to the heavens. And turn to your student guide, page 83 now, and we'll get into those questions. And again, remember, you can always pause this video if it's moving too quickly for you. Question number 1 on page 83. How did Babylon change under Hammurabi's rule? It grew from a small city-state into a center for trade and government. What happened to Babylon in the 1,000 years following Hammurabi's rule? Sumer declined following Hammurabi's death, but did not disappear. The Babylonians built on the foundations led by Sargon, Hammurabi, and others to build a glorious city. Eventually, a new king, Nebuchadnezzar, rebuilt the city as the capital of his empire. For 1,000 years, Babylon grew as the empire expanded. Huge towers, mammoth walls, and ornately decorated gates and palaces were built to adorn the splendid city. And that is a lot to write. So again, pause this video if you need to, please. Oops, sorry about that. I'm not sure why that picture got a little smaller there so you can see. There we go. Where did Babylon's trade routes extend during Nebuchadnezzar's rule? Babylonians traded up and down the Euphrates River and traveled to the Persian Gulf, far into Asia Minor, and to the ports along the Mediterranean Sea. Question number 4. Describe the walls Nebuchadnezzar had built. He fortified the double walls around the city and had an outer wall built beyond that. The outer wall was so wide it could hold 2 chariots side by side. Towers were built on top of the outer wall, and a moat was built around it. Question number 5. Describe great Babylonian building projects completed during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Ishtar Gate, Processional Way, the Temple of Marduk, the Hanging Gardens, the Tower of Babel. All right, and then again, your reading pages for the rest of this lesson, part 2, reading pages 88 to 94. Super important to get those read so it, again, ties everything together. Important vocabulary words to understand. Splendor is magnificent and splendid. Appearance, grandeur. Homesick means experiencing a longing for one's home during a period of absence from it. Reign is the period during which someone or something is prominent. And then terrace is each of a series of flat areas made on a slope. And here we come to our quote section for the second part of our lecture. Architecture is space structured to serve man and to move him. Oops, that's a little big too. A couple little typos in this flip video. I apologize for that. All right, so thank you so much for joining me today. As always, we're trying to fix that to make it smaller. There we go. As always, stay positive, stay fighting, stay brave, stay ambitious, stay focused, and stay strong. This was a really, really long flip video, so I appreciate you sticking with me the whole time. Have an amazing day. Thanks so much.